Hello, exiles. Long time no see. In fact, such a long time that I started a new build. This was a flash in the pan idea 4 days ago. I'm level 92, and I could not make this build because let's be honest, this was the original build guide on the channel, and I kind of realized I had the know-how from the changes in the league to apply it in a way that would make a strong build. And it did. It made a very strong build. Unfortunately, this is kind of a sad video because I'm running out of time to enjoy the league. I've made promises many months ago to my younger brother and some other friends that I would come play the new World of Warcraft expansion with him, so I have to like get prepared for that. That said, here we are. And let's talk about the build a little bit. My current character is level 93. I only have 4,500 life, but this is Modern Poe and things are not like that anymore. Some of my gear is a little bit expensive. I would say the 30% ashes is not terribly cheap, although this item is not nearly as expensive as it used to be. It's very important. As you can see, I have Enduring Bond anointed because that's just very far for this tree to deal with. Believe it or not, a Massive Ring Thread of Hope is rather cheap, which I was kind of shocked about. I think for this one-off perfect roll, I paid like a div. And then you could get a much worse roll for like 20C or something bonkers cheap like that. And then as going over, just some of the price beats, because I feel like I should start with that. This particular Elegant Hubris was probably the expensive item in the build right now. This was, I want to say, 6 to 9 Divine Orbs for this specific one. And the reason we like this one specifically is because we get to 3 nodes that give us 80% increased minion damage. So, why is that important? Well, I should preface by saying there's a lot of jewels you can get right here that won't necessarily hit, like, this we'll say 8 points, right? We're not going to count the travel nodes because we're going up that way anyways. That's 8 points for 240% minion damage. You could definitely get for much cheaper the same thing, and it would just cost you 1 or 2 extra points. And I feel that's important to say because, yeah, we started with budget, and I don't want anyone to freak out and immediately leave the video. As you can see, we are a champion. This solves our accuracy requirements. It gives us a ton of tank. The constant uptime on fortification is very nice. And yeah, we don't need to go 4 points anymore. That's one of the things that really inspired me to make this build, because now we also get inspirational. And inspirational is freaking amazing when you are playing a build that has lots of allies to take advantage of what you're doing. And the other aspects of this build that kind of make it go is heavy Warcry leaning, which it isn't just our survivability, but also our minion survivability. It gives us and our minions onslaught. And I had known for a while there was already like another dominating blow build way back a few leagues ago that kind of used this strategy to get around it. But this, I don't know if the person who made that build is still updating it, but right now this build got a lot stronger with all the changes made. Just, yeah. As for our defenses, you can see I have 84% all res right now. When I actually have the Warcry up, it's 86. And if I'm near a boss, this actually goes to 88. And we're very durable at that point. You could make some improvements to the build, specifically getting Warcry buff effect on the helmet and stuff. Basically, achieving 90% all elemental resistances is very doable. Again, my equipment is kind of scuffed at this point. Pretty much every slot that isn't a unique item could be a lot better. Even the jewels in here could be better. They're Fractured Chaos res rolls that hit life and minion damage, which is good. But if that other prefix were, say, a good armor roll, I would have a lot more armor. I don't know what else to say. Like, this belt is potentially very absurd. It's currently already very absurd because it's like fixing our chaos res and giving us a lot of life and damage. But enough of that. How does the build play? Well, you should be seeing right up over there a video playing that's just kind of me running maps and doing general stuff on the build to show you that's on this character. Currently, most of that stuff is probably 2 or 3 levels old because because I've been going in and, just because I've been jumping in and getting stuff recorded as I've been going because I knew my time was going to run out soon. But enough of the in the game stuff. Let's get over to Path of Building and talk about what's under the hood. The Path of Building I'm showing here is what will be linked to the video. It is a little more idealized. It's a higher level. Some things have been changed, but it is the same gear. And that's kind of important because I want to show that I don't change much from where the build currently is. This is just a little bit extra to show where it ends up at. In this version of the tree, we're at 5.8 million pinnacle DPS. This is a very poor representation of our actual DPS, but I'll get to that in a moment. let's talk about the build and how it works and why it is good this league. Basically, banners are crazy awesome. War cries are crazy awesome. Even rage is crazy awesome. And yeah, this is one of the things I'm really missing on my live tree is this little stuff right here. The way war cries synergize with banners and rage right now is kind of absurd. If you have war cries, banners and rage are free. Yeah, you can get this one, gain 5 valor when you war cry if able, and then gain 1 rage per 5 enemy power up to 5 when you war cry. So that's basically just constant uptime on the banners and the rage. Obviously, you can't have uptime on the banners unless you're using perfidy to like keep your valor going while the banner is already placed. Also, the Defiant Stand here gives us frenzy charges when we place our banner, and that's really nice. Just an even bigger punch when we drop it. The actual tree is structured around a few things happening. You'll see like some odd nodes out here. These give us just enough buff effect so we can break 100%. Breaking 100% is important because things like Ancestral Cry give 2% all max res instead of 1. And that's part of why we get so high currently at this level. We're accomplishing that right now with a 20% increased Warcry buff effect, Eldritch implicit. We can remove this if we can get a better helmet, because there is a Coral Craft now that will give you Warcry buff effect. And once we do that, we immediately go to 89%, because we get that implicit becomes +1 all max res, and we could even go to +2, and that would be our 90%. We currently have 40k armor, which is an important thing to keep in mind, because Precursor Greaves here on these boots, this is the only new armor base in the build currently. These are Titan Gauntlets, this is an Astral Plate, this is a Sam Knight helmet. Our armor probably should be like, I don't know. It's probably another 1,000 flat armor, which would put us to 47k. Not that it really matters, we have enough armor for it not to matter, where like the smaller increases aren't the biggest thing. And then additionally, there's the armor we could get on our Darkness and Throne Jewels, which would really start to punch things up. I should probably address this right now, the reason why it says minions deal 500% more damage. Simulating your DPS in Path of Building with Dominating Blow is kind of tricky, because if I applied additional instances here with the count, our DPS goes up way too much, because it's also including my damage. So this only affects basically to simulate that we have 6 sentinels attacking with us. So this is like spun up to normal stuff. There's no magic ones, there's no rare ones. Our DPS is actually way, way obnoxiously higher than this, because in mapping, you'll have 3 magic sentinels, 1 rare sentinel, potentially 3 ascended sentinels from Val Domination, and each one of those counts as 3 normal sentinels, more or less. So it's probably something, I don't know. I don't even know how much the actual DPS is. It's a lot. It's a tremendous amount. We do run Dark Marionettes with kind of a basic Spectre setup. This is just so that it's completely out of the way and you don't have to worry about it. You know I build for comfort if you've been following this channel. They keep up our Feeding Frenzy and Maim, and because we have Flesh and Stone and Pride, this Maim that says 10% increased physical damage taken basically gets elevated to like 17.5%. And the same thing would happen for, say, Intimidate or Shock, because the Flesh and Stone and Pride are more multipliers that are stacking together, and they're also multiplying those increased multipliers with them. It's a really big improvement to damage. I'm pretty sure with Maim and everything up, things go much higher. Currently in this tree as well that I don't actually have in the game, so if you're watching the footage, I have the Awaken gems all filled out. I do have Awaken Melee Splash, which this is another thing that's kind of making our DPS much lower than it should be. Awaken Melee Fizz and Awaken Brutality are really good. They give us more damage. They also give us Crush and Intimidate. And since we and our minions are hitting so often with these support gems, yeah, that's basically up all the time, that is reflected here. What isn't reflected here is, well, the banner placement, which immediately jumps the damage by that much. And then also Awaken Melee Splash. In a Pinnacle situation, we're definitely not running this, just as an example. Minion speed instead, now we're at 9 mil. That's still not including Val Domination. And then we take banner off and it goes to 6.5. You can probably do better than minion speed. That's just the one that I include for right now. Obviously, you need like a white socket for that anyway. Multi-strike gets recommended, and multi-strike is probably fine. This might actually be the best switch, especially if you were to do, say, Awakened, because our exerted attacks aren't as important, and this turns that off. So in a perfect world, and this would be very expensive, obviously, you would cut Awaken Melee Splash for Awaken Multi-Strike, and then the DPS would be silly. But yeah, that is my recommendation. I'm actually going to save that to the build just as like a switch option. I'll have to add that to the notes. And just like my other proper build guides, there is a whole bunch of notes to read here that will tell you everything about everything. And there is a lot of everything, even explaining how the build works. Because what really makes the build go, and I haven't even touched on this yet because it's dominating blow. It's a complicated minion build, right? It's not complicated to play. Dominating blow of inspiring. Dominating Blow of Inspiring gives you an inherent increases and reductions to minion damage also apply to this skill's damage at 250% value. At 20% quality, this goes up to 300%. At 50% quality, it goes up to 375%. We achieve this with Ashes of the Stars. This is probably the only true melee build that wants Ashes of the Stars as its actual best in slot. And my old Dominating Blow build was not a true melee build. It was a cheat build, but you can see here, I'm actually contributing like almost half the DPS. In fact, I think I am contributing more half the DPS or more because this is including Impale and Bleed and everything. That's really cool. I really appreciate that. You know, I'm actually in it this time, and you hit hard. You run into the map. You do not need help spinning up. You smack a pack of enemies with Ancestral Cry up, and everything dies, and you suddenly have an army instantly. Also, if your minions die for any reason, you're still fighting, which is very good. You know, I don't need to explain why that's better than how it used to be. That said, Ashes of the Stars is better for more reasons than just what it does to our primary skill. No, this actually wouldn't be good enough, but what it does do for the rest of our gems is completely absurd. Obviously, +1 level to everything is great. You know what's better? Having 100% increased cooldown recovery rate on your war cries with 0 tree investment. All of my war cries have a 4-second cooldown just because of Ashes of the Stars and 20% quality. That's absurd and ridiculously good. I don't think I really need to explain why, but also because we're at the 4-second breakpoint and because we dropped 3 in a row, our uptime on Onslaught is basically 100%. Also, we have Warning Call, which is a very large amount of armor. I think I pulled that Warning Call thing from actually watching a Steel Mage video, so shout out to that guy. He's pretty good at Path of Exile, you know? As you can see, the buffs in the build are generally, as per usual, displayed rather sparsely as to what we're doing. Again, this DPS is incredibly conservative to what you're actually performing in a fight, especially against a Pinnacle boss. Although, if you see Pinnacle footage over there, I was running it with this setup with Awaken Melee Splash, and in fact, it was worse than that. I had Minion Speed instead of Ruthless, which is a pretty big DPS loss. And we're fast enough where Ruthless feels fine. You're not going to feel weird using Ruthless at all in this build. As a final note, because there's so much that it does, I couldn't get to it. Cooldown recovery rate is also scaled by gem quality on Convocation. So Convocation has a cooldown time of 2 seconds and a duration of 2 seconds. So that's also 100% uptime if you're just constantly keeping it tapped. And you kind of want to keep it tapped because you want to pull your minions to you right before you Warcry so that they get all the buffs in the Onslaught as well. And you kind of enter a rhythm when you're mapping where if you're doing it right, you're just a Stampede, which was the old Dominating Blow playstyle. But now you are actually contributing, and it's retained at a state of the game when the game is honestly much more difficult than it was back then. Back then, 2 million DPS was like primo. Right now, I have almost 6 million DPS, and honestly, it's like it's understated. And even then, there are times where like the DPS doesn't feel that great because, wow, Path of Exile is hard now. All of that said, I do have mock-up POBs elsewhere kind of in development. I'm not going to get to them. That's the thing. Like, I'm going to keep playing, and maybe I do. Maybe there'll be an update video. But this is what I have to show concretely to you, the viewers, about what the build is and how it works, how it can be done. This is going to be my league starter next league, unless they, like, nerf something that completely trashes it, which, man, that would be very GGG to completely buff melee and then immediately nerf it into obscurity the next league. That's never happened before. Anyway, I hope you're all having a great league. I'm sad to leave Settlers of Calgar, even though the league's been out for so long already, and I've been playing the whole time. My buddy Nino's been playing the whole time. We've been going nuts. If you've been in the stream, you've heard Nino a lot probably this league, and part of that is because I remember to actually enable Discord sound instead of looking like a crazy person talking to myself. Proceeding with the build, how does it get stronger from here? A lot of that comes down to, I would say, slightly better roll jewels. I kind of have decent ones shown here. A big part of it is that the gear sucks. I'm just going to say that. We don't have a +2 helmet. Getting any sort of corruption going on our body armor when it's better is also a big option, right? If we get the +2 helmet with Warcry buff effect, and then go for just a +2 body armor, that would be massive. A +4 body armor is like an immediate 1.2 million DPS upgrade, because that just gem levels are amazing for minions. That's just how it is. And we like, that's kind of the one thing that this build doesn't do as well as the older version, but you can still get them, especially at high investment. And this build actually goes pretty far at high investment with everything. That's 13 mil just from the get-go. Yeah, that's 13 mil without any other changes. That's pretty good. I'd say that's pretty good, especially considering you would have 88% all max elemental reses at that point. Admittedly, the body armor would be very expensive, and the helmet would be very expensive as well. That's why I'm not simulating them, because maybe you don't want to play this build that long. But yeah, the build has a lot of room to grow yet, just like in those basic things. That doesn't even include other things I could do to push the build that I haven't really looked into yet, and there's a lot of it. You know, this is 4 days of playtime, and I'm out of time. I should also mention very quick, the weapon slot on this build is very flexible. This is just something I picked up for a few divine orbs. I rune forged minion damage onto it because you can get a pretty big roll, and that craft isn't cheap, or is cheap rather, relatively speaking. Again, this weapon could be significantly better, and in fact, my breakdown about... I'm actually going back and recording this part, and I do a breakdown about what the damage could be, and I never updated the weapon to a better weapon. So the breakdown at the end of the video could actually be a lot better. Anyway, get the biggest, most damaging weapon you can for cheap. In this case, it's probably going to be an axe, because two-handed axes are just good like that. There's probably some argument that could be made for like going staves and grabbing these block notes here for more survivability, if that's what you're about. It's up to you. This is probably the most flexible thing on the build. You just want a strong fizz axe, or fizz weapon rather, with attack speed, and that Runeforge craft for minion damage. The fizz damage craft might be better with like if the weapon is really, really good, because of the way those stats kind of scale together, but probably not, honestly. It's this is like almost 200% increased damage. Speaking of increased damage, we have like over 2,000. I love dominating, love inspiring. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope maybe you saw something in this video where you were like, oh, I can apply that to my build. I'm going to put a Thread of Hope here and grab that +1 to all maximum Res with a bunch of life and armor and int and damage and chaos res. I love this Thread of Hope. This is like my favorite thing that I found when I was setting up the build. I was like, oh my god, it's amazing there. Look at all this value, especially this node. I feel like most melee builds could benefit from that node in particular, because you can get that big attack speed roll on your bone ring, which, does the one bone ring I have actually have that? No, I don't even have attack speed on my bone ring. This isn't even a bone ring. There's a ton of damage and stats I can get right there. It's been fun. I love the league. I hate to say that I'm kind of stepping away from it. I don't want to. I really don't want to. But I made promises, and where I'm going seems like it's going to be at least a good time for a month or two anyways. So yeah. Have a good one, Exiles.